Good evening, and welcome to this first episode of Men's Hour. Every Sunday we'll be bringing you a mix of subjects, from men's health to speed cameras to how to make it in the movie business. On today's programme, with all the conflicting advice on healthy eating, we'll get back to basics and talk nutrition and men's fitness. And the British film The King's Speech is being touted as a possible Oscar winner. It tells the story of King George VI and how he overcame his stammer. On the anniversary of his death, we'll explore to what extent the royal family has shaped our national culture. But first, we join Anthony Beckwith, who's standing up for men this Valentine's Day.
Roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet and so are you. This is just one of the versions of the traditional love poems sent on Valentine's Day. But is this lovey-dovey stuff really what men want to receive on Valentine's Day? Where did Valentine's Day even start? And who is this Saint Valentine? As with many things, we can blame ancient Rome. The 14th of February was a holiday to honour Juno, the goddess of women and marriage. It was also on this day that the love lotteries took place. In a time when boys and girls were kept separate, it was on this day when they could get together. The girls would write their names down, the names would get shuffled, and the boys would pick a name. The boy and the girl got together and celebrated the holiday as a couple, and would normally end up spending the rest of the year together, and eventually getting married. So is it possibly because of this day of celebration of the goddess of women and marriage, that still today, Valentine's Day is seen as a day for men to treat women, and the traditions of the love lottery where the men would pick the women? Or possibly we could blame St Valentine himself, who died in jail on the 14th of February 269 AD. He left a farewell note to the jailer's daughter and signed it, "From your Valentine." So it was St Valentine who wrote the first Valentine's Day card then, is it? If only he knew what a legacy he had left to men. It's always hard knowing which card to choose from the seemingly endless choice. Love hearts, cuddly bears, all signed from your Valentine. But is this soppy stuff really what men want to see in their cards? Earlier in the week, I spoke to the manager of the Clinton card store in York, Laura Wary, who told me more about the Valentine's card trends and how the types of cards have changed over the past few years. Is there a difference in the type of cards men go for or women go for?
Men tend to go for the funny ones, the humorous ones, and women tend to go for the more traditional, soppy, lovey-dovey ones with long poems.
What do you mean by funny?
You know, like those photo cards with captions underneath, or cartoons, whereas women like the cutie ones with the little lovey-dovey hearts and stuff on them.
Have the types of cards changed over the past few years, do you reckon?
I think it's stayed fairly static, but obviously the number of cards that we produce has risen, so that people have a lot more choice nowadays.
Do you try and target men more than women, or women more than men, or is it kind of both pretty much the same?
Well, obviously both men and women have to buy cards on Valentine's Day, so we try and tend to target the full board, so both men and women, and also younger couples and older couples, and so we make specific types of cards for specific demographics.
Some men would argue that buying a Valentine's card is the worst part of Valentine's Day. Why do you think this is?
I think it's because they've got so much choice nowadays. It's a pretty stressful experience trying to pick a card that your partner's going to like.
So it seems even the experts can't help us when it comes to choosing that Valentine's card. So I took to the streets to find out what makes the perfect Valentine's Day for women.
As long as the man's genuinely thinking about you.
Flowers, yes. It's always nice to have some flowers. You know, maybe go out for a meal or something like that.
Just spending time with someone.
Nice bouquet of flowers first thing in the morning, out for lunch, and then maybe evening in a nice hotel with an evening meal.
Meal out, night in a hotel, pampered, perfect.
Lovely meal, bunch of lovely roses, and a box of chocolates.
A nice meal, a bottle of champers, and bed by 6.
But in a time of increasing equal rights for men and women in this country, is it still fair that the men have to treat and spoil the women? Should it not be a day where the men get spoilt just as much as their other half? Earlier on today, I caught up with Ian Angel from the student magazine The Yorker, who wrote the man's guide to the perfect Valentine's Day. Firstly, in this guide, you talk about buying a card as probably the worst part of the Valentine's process. Why do you think this is?
Well, for two reasons. One, it's quite annoying having to buy something where somebody else has written a message. when in fact you want to just, in general, don't you want to write your own message, your special person? And also, it's because it's overwhelming, the choice available, and I'm very indecisive. And I find you've only got two options really, though. Ultimately, you've got either vulgar sexual ones, or you've got over romantic soppy ones, and neither of those are messages I really want to send out on Valentine's Day.
You're also right, it's a sham cooked up by people who make money from the day, but that we shouldn't ignore it. If it's a sham, why not?
I think because there's still a value to the day itself, but you don't have to necessarily do the day in the way that these companies tell you to do. If you do it in their particular way, they stand to make a lot of money from it. But if you just sort of take it as a day to be nice to your girlfriend or boyfriend, then that's you still acknowledge the day, but you're not necessarily doing what any card company is telling you to do.
You also talk about traditional things to do for Valentine's. What are they, and why do you think they're so traditional? I think
traditional things are, for example, nice things like, say, a walk in the park. That's a nice thing. Again, that's one of the free things. But I suppose your traditional Valentine's Day would, say, be spent in a nice French restaurant, having a man play the violin in the background, and I'm sure that's very nice. But it's also it's such a cliche that it's kind of, if you're doing something like that, it just comes across as quite unimaginative.
So what are the alternatives then?
Literally anything you want. I would like to take my girlfriend somewhere that I know she'd like. Say you've got a girlfriend that you know she really likes Greek food, for example, then you take her to a Greek restaurant, regardless of whether or not that's properly romantic.
Do you think the day is more about men treating women, or the other way around?
I think traditionally it is more about men treating women. I don't think that's necessarily a problem, but I don't see why it has to be either. I suppose if you want to go back to how traditional courtship was done, I suppose you go back 100 years or so, the men all had money and women didn't really, so the men had to take them out to a restaurant anyway, and it's a nice kind of sort of wooing thing to do, which I know is very, very old-fashioned. It's an interesting thing about the women treating men as well, because I think a lot of women do actually end up treating the men later on at the day, if you know what I mean.
Is there a woman's guide to the perfect Valentine's Day out there, and why didn't you write that?
Well, I don't think I'd feel qualified to write that, and there's not one to my knowledge. But I can't see why it would have to differ that much from the man's guide to the perfect Valentine's Day, really.
Maybe next year?
Perhaps, yeah.
Well, I look forward to reading that next year then.
Well, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So it would seem that even today, and for the foreseeable future, that Valentine's Day is going to be a day for the women within our lives to get spoilt, and for us to spoil them. I guess they have to put up with us for the rest of the year. Happy Valentine's Day.